Good evening, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening, Bill Diamond.
Welcome to the Church of the SETI Institute. No, first of all, a big welcome to all of you and a big thank you. And I know that among those of you in our audience are many of the fans and supporters and longtime attendees of the SETI Talks series that we've been doing really on a weekly basis since 2007. And for the faithful, you know that the SETI Talks are all recorded and they're all archived on our YouTube channel, SETI Talks. And we have over 400 hour-long lectures in all the various scientific disciplines associated with the work of the Institute, from astronomy and astrophysics to exoplanets to planetary exploration and climate and geoscience, and of course, not least of which is our SETI research. So I'm delighted to be telling you, because again, our regular followers will be aware that for the last couple of months we've been on a hiatus from the SETI Talks, because unfortunately, in the last venue we were in, which was the beautiful auditorium at Microsoft Silicon Valley campus, inexplicably, Microsoft is taking what to me looks like a brand new beautiful building and tearing it down to build a more brand new beautiful building. And I would volunteering to just take the old one and they wouldn't have to tear it down, save some money. But that didn't work out. So we've been, for the last couple of months, looking for a new venue. And I'm very pleased to report that we have found one. I'm also pleased, absolutely, we're very excited. Also pleased to tell you that it's a secret still, because everybody likes secrets. It's probably a conspiracy theory, and it might be fake news. But in actual fact, we have found a new home. It's on the Palo Alto-Menlo Park border. It's a beautiful auditorium. We're just waiting to sign the agreement, and until I get that signed, I don't want to actually say what it is. But that will be done in the next week to 10 days. And we already have a schedule. We will be going back in action with SETI Talks starting in August. Actually, the cadence is going to change, as I think I had mentioned in a lot of our earlier talks, from weekly to monthly. And we're going from daytime to evening, because we found that the daytime slot just meant that too many people couldn't make the talks. And the evening session, which will probably start around this same kind of time frame, should allow more people to be able to attend the talks. And we're going to be doing a lot more fun activities, a lot more things like panel discussions on topical matters of our science and work and those of our colleagues in other places like NASA and elsewhere. So we're looking forward to having a really eventful and impactful series of lectures. In August, again, for those of you who have attended our talks in the past, you may remember that once a year, the undergraduate summer interns, who are part of what's called the REU program, the Research Experience for Undergrads, who spend a summer working with scientists on a one-on-one basis at the SETI Institute, supporting their research, will be doing what we call lightning talks. So they'll be standing up in front of the audience to give quick summary descriptions of the science and research that they've helped support over their summer. And they always do an amazing job, and we always have an amazing group of students, and we do again this year. So we're very fortunate to have them. And I'm also, I have to say, we're very fortunate to have a bunch of scientists who are always excited about being mentors to these young people every summer. And it's a really wonderful program. So the August event will be the REU students' lightning talk presentations for their summer internship. In September, the next talk will be, for those of you who are following space stuff, how many of you know what's happening to Cassini in September? A couple of hands, a couple of hundred hands. Okay, we have some subject matter experts here. So the Cassini space mission is coming to an end on September 15th, when the Cassini space probe will go in a spectacular crash landing down onto the surface or lack of surface of Saturn. So that's going to be a spectacular event. And that week, we are going to be putting on a panel session about the Cassini mission. We've had SETI scientists publishing a lot of papers on Cassini, including papers about Saturn's rings and about the moon Enceladus, et cetera. So that should be another fun program. That will be the September one. So look for the SETI events to be starting up again in August. In the evening, we'll send out all the usual warnings and social media alerts and emails, et cetera. And again, the first talk will be our undergraduates. So we're very excited about that. Meanwhile, we have a really fun event and evening planned for you tonight. We're really delighted and honored to have two amazing people sitting on stage and a third standing off to the right to educate, enlighten, and inform us. So those of you who don't know Jill Tarter, please leave now.
But buy a book before you do.
But buy a book before you do. That's right. Yes, that's right. Buy a book, then leave. Anyway, Dr. Jill Tarter, as many of you know, is one of the pioneers of SETI research, one of the pioneering women astronomers and radio astronomers in the world, really a leader and pioneer on many levels, and has had a lifelong career of incredible productivity and interest and intrigue. And not the least of which was captured, at least in part, let's say the first part, by the movie Contact, where Jill's real-life activities was the inspiration for the character portrayed by Jodie Foster in that movie Contact. And that movie, by the way, is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. So that's a very timely event to be coinciding with tonight's event. And a wonderful author, very accomplished author and writer, Sarah Scoles, has written a book, a biography about Jill's life and work called, surprisingly enough, Making Contact, which is what we're still endeavoring to do. And we will, mark my words. But so tonight we have a wonderful opportunity to hear directly from Jill and from Sarah about the book, about Jill's work. And we are also honored to have a wonderful Master of Ceremonies to conduct us through this evening's activity, Dr. Seth Shostack, to my right. So Seth, please come on. So Seth is a senior astronomer at the Institute and a fellow of the Institute. And he's also the host of our radio program, Big Picture Science, which is both a weekly radio program that you can catch on various NPR stations around the country, but also a podcast. Very popular, wonderful general science program. So if you don't know about it, now you do, and you definitely want to check it out. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Seth to lead us through the discussion, and thanks very much.
Okay, this event this evening is sharp, it's snappy, so we're going to get right into it. I'm going to stay here behind the lectern for this while we grill the two of these guests here like a mess of onions and try and get some of the background on this book, Making Contact, Jill Tarter, and the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So for my first question is to you, Sarah. This is your first book. So what drew you to this subject matter? Was it Jill? Was it SETI? Was it, you know, the saleability of the idea?
Well, you know, mostly it came to me in a dream, I think. Flash. I happened to watch the movie Contact, which came out when I was 12 years old. And since it's the 20th anniversary, I know how old I am. And it had a huge impact on me. I was really obsessed with it in the way that only a 12-year-old can be. And then I grew up, as one does, and I was working at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Green Bank, West Virginia. One day, I was driving a bus, and Jill Tarter over here left her purse on it, and I had the extreme pleasure of returning it. And so then a few years later, I was working at a magazine. I wanted to write a book. I didn't know what to write about, and then somehow it dawned on me that this person whose fictional life had had so much of an impact on me was a real person. No one had written a book about her. I had given her her purse back, so I said, hey, one time I gave you your purse back, can I write your biography? And she said yes.
No, she said, who's going to want to read a book about me?
She did say that up until like yesterday.
Well, obviously people, what is it? It's doing very well on Amazon ranking. You should go to Amazon and check it out. But I don't want to get too much into the mechanics of this, Sarah, but let me ask you a further question. How did you deal with the problem that confronts anybody who writes a book and is as problematic in a way as writing the manuscript, and that is getting a publisher to show interest in actually printing and distributing the book? Did you write some sample chapters? Was it the idea of Jill Tarter? Did they like the idea? What was it?
People are very interested in the idea of role models and these women like Jill, who people like me admired growing up, and people confronting obstacles. And then, I mean, you have all seen the internet. People love aliens, and people love searching for them. It's a popular topic, and so I think publishers were interested in that. That said, we did get some interesting rejections asking if, for instance, Jill Tarter knew when she would find aliens, and could we publish the book at that point. What's my favorite? But I wrote a sample chapter. I did a few interviews with Jill, enough to get kind of a broad outline of things, and then convinced everyone that it was a great idea.
Well, they say you shouldn't give up until you've gotten 30 rejection slips. I take it you didn't get 30.
I didn't get 30, but
that's why you didn't
I guess I'll have to give up later.
So in the end, Pegasus Books, it's a major publisher, elected to publish the bio. What was their reasoning? What did they think? Where did they think the market lay? Was it, as you say, the interest in aliens, SETI, that kind of thing?
I think it was honestly the mix of the interest between aliens and in Jill herself. And we were lucky enough that Jessica Case, who is the editor and the deputy publisher at Pegasus, had wanted to be an astronaut when she was a kid and was very interested in this personally. And so she was biased in a way that really helped us out.
Jill, what did you think of this, a biography? You're not one that, goes around and saying, hey, I'm Jill Tarter kind of thing, especially written by somebody as well-known as Sarah. I mean, she was an editor at Astronomy Magazine. For many people in the audience probably are familiar with Astronomy Magazine. What was your reaction?
Yeah, I was really skeptical that this book could interest many people, but Sarah was very persistent and willing to take a risk. I mean, she quit her job at a magazine to come live in California for 2 years, working with me on this book. And I love her writing voice, and it's been fun, the whole project.
Well, you say it's been fun. I mean, can you elaborate a little bit on how you did this? Did you just sit down for hours at a time with Sarah? Did she call you on the phone? Did you, I don't know, were there written questions she'd email you? How did she get the info?
I have 3 bookcases in my office, and across the top of all of those are photograph albums from the time that when I was very young. And it has my old family pictures in it, and so that's my life in photographs. And we sat with those and went through them, and I said, oh, this was this meeting, and this is what we did here, and Sarah took a lot of notes, recorded what we talked about, and we spent a lot of hours looking at a lot of pictures.
And something that's striking about the book is that a lot of it takes place, as you say, I'm not trying to, embarrass anybody here, but decades ago, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of detail. I mean, there's what people said, how they act, that kind of thing. And so these obviously made a big enough impression on you that you were able to relate them to Sarah.
Right, and when pieces were missing, I actually sat there and tried to write it myself in Sarah's voice, and then fixed it up, but yeah. And
when someone appeared in the book and was going to be saying something, I would also go to them and say, did you say this? What did you say? And then old newspaper clippings. For a little while, I got a New York Times archive subscription and would look up, what did the New York Times have to say about this event when it happened, if it was important enough to be in the New York Times.
Okay, this is sort of to both of you, but I'll start with you, Sarah. Certainly a leitmotif in making contact, which is, I assume, the obvious pun, is the fact that Jill was not just a SETI pioneer, but she was boldly going where women were not encouraged to go. So it's really about breaking down barriers, right? I mean, that's really underpins a lot of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Jill Tarter is a pioneer in a lot of ways, from being basically the only woman in her major at Cornell University, and then one of few women astronomers in a field that itself was kind of on the edges of stuff. She can probably speak to that difficulty better than I can, but if you read the book, you'll find out that unfortunately a lot of that hasn't changed exactly some of the difficulties that women face in science.
Yeah, we thought it was getting a lot better, but we've seen in the past couple of years that maybe that's not quite right yet. I did have a wonderful time in Norway 2 weeks ago. You saw that, all right? But
well, tell them. Not everybody saw.
Well,
unless you don't
there
want
was a
to.
festival called Starmus in Trondheim, Norway. A great putting together stars and music. It was the fourth time we'd done it. The first 3 times were in Tenerife, Spain. But they are big on musicians, astronauts, Nobel laureates, kind of thing. There's one Nobelist, an economist, who had 2 opportunities on the stage to make remarks that were not very kind to women. And after the second one, I had to stand up and ask him why he used his time on the stage to piss off half the world's population. And he didn't have any idea what I was talking about. It was so totally, the bias was so unconscious that even when it was explained to him by Neil deGrasse Tyson, he had done it. It didn't, yeah. So, what I was thinking about was in astronomy, these past couple of years has been kind of a rough ride for young women when we have been exposing and shaming male professors who have been using their power over students, either male or female. So I thought things had gotten much better, but still got a ways to go. However, in Norway, of the people that came up and said, "Thank you for making those remarks," half of them were young men. So Norway's on the right track, I think.
This evening was sponsored by Norway, by the way.
But Jill, actually, your mentors, at least in school, right? There weren't any women among them, were there?
No, there weren't. And I was very fortunate to have John Billingham and Barney Oliver as mentors. John's wife was a renowned cardiologist at Stanford. John was very sensitive to gender issues. Barney, not so much. He's a gruff corporate warlord, but he really cared about SETI. And since I was willing to do the work, he cared about me. And I was really fortunate. I had a hero, though. Two heroes that were female. Admiral Grace Hopper, all right? It's better to beg forgiveness than to ask permission, all right? And Margaret Burbage, who at one time was the Astronomer Royal in the UK, and when she came to this country, she was denied access to the telescopes on the mountains because you can't have women up there. Going to disturb, really going to upset the guys. And so she, having been turned down once, she said to her husband, Jeffrey, okay, you apply for the time. When he got it, she went along as his night assistant. And after a couple of years of this, she applied under her own name. And they said, look, we told you. And she said, I've been on the mountain for 2 years. You haven't even noticed it. Give it up. Right? And so Margaret has been a big hero of mine, and I was fortunate to get to spend some time with her.
There have been articles in the papers, including the national papers in the past couple of weeks, about the glass ceiling for women, even here in the Silicon Valley, which we like to think is enlightened. But and so I just sort of like your take. If you look at the landscape today, how do you see it? I mean, are things the same? Are they better? Are they much better? Or do we have a long way to go?
Well, as I said a couple of minutes ago, I misled myself, or allowed myself to be misled, to be thinking that at least in my profession, things were much better. Things are better, but not much better. And in the Silicon Valley, I think we've been seeing that it's a really rough road for young women in pursuit of technology and that kind of entrepreneurship here.
Sarah, tell us some of the things that Jill said about trying to be a scientist without a Y chromosome, which I'm told by my wife is mostly leads to defects in behavior. Without a Y, that's another Y chromosome defect. What were some of the stories she told you that most impressed you?
The one that has stuck with me the most, because I was also a physics undergraduate like Jill, was Jill attended Cornell University to get a engineering physics degree, correct? And all of the boys were in one dorm on one side of campus, and the girls were in another side. And the boys would take home these very difficult problem sets, and they would all go in some great boy room together and work on them and get the solutions together. But Jill wasn't allowed over there, and she had to just do it on her own. And so she had to be better than the people who could work together on it. And I think that she really carried that with her in a lot of situations where maybe there was a boys' club over here, explicitly as a dorm or not, and just had to always be a little bit of a step above, which is true of a lot of other women in other fields and also minorities of various. It's just not as easy.
And one of the problems with that kind of relationship is that I never was part of a team until I had to lead one. That's a very bad way to learn how to get the best out of a team.
I'm struck by the fact that, well, when SETI began, there was a lot of optimism, right? I mean, some of the early SETI pioneers, and after all, you are a SETI pioneer, you know, they thought all we have to do is rig up an antenna and look a little bit carefully at the sky, and we may find that the sky is filled with signals. It doesn't seem to be filled with strong signals, that much it seems we can say. Even Frank Drake, you know, when he was doing Project Ozma, he picked up something you know, on the second star he looked at, and he tells me that his reaction was, could it be this easy? Well, apparently it's not, that was not ET, unfortunately. It may not be that easy, but given the fact that you've dedicated your career to this quest, how do you look on the SETI efforts? I mean, don't people ask you all the time, you spent your career doing this, we still haven't picked up this signal, don't you have regrets about that?
Oh, no regrets at all. I've gotten to spend a life trying to answer a question that humanity's been asking forever. You know, are we alone? And I've gotten to be part of the start of an exploration. I may not be there at the end, but I've gotten the opportunity to start something that I think is really important. You know, when I was a postdoc, I was working on brown dwarfs, little stars that don't have enough mass to burn hydrogen to helium at their cores stably. And so they eventually just go out. And I started a postdoc at NASA Ames, and I was having a great time, but you know, occasionally I'd walk along and think, why is the public paying my salary to do this? I'm enthralled. I think this is great. I'd like to know the answers, but gee, I have a National Research Council fellowship, so the taxpayers are paying my salary. And you know, once I began to start working on SETI, I never had that thought again, because I knew that people out there in general were really interested in what I was doing. Some of them thought I was absolutely wrong. Some of them were completely convinced that there's no other life beyond Earth. Some of them believed they'd already encountered it. But nobody, I never had to feel that I was doing something that was only for my benefit.
I always find the people who say we're being visited, that's job security, is it not? I mean, but let me ask you this, because you know, when I first came to the SETI Institute, which was just before the Civil War started, I had to say that...
I remember, I hired you.
Yeah, you were there. I think I met you in the late 1970s. We did a SETI experiment in Europe in 1980, right? But, you know, people would ask, the public would ask you, they would ask Frank Drake, they'd ask, you know, Peter Backus, they would say, so when are you going to find the signal? As, you know, I figured people would say, who knows? But almost everybody had an answer, and it was the number of years until they were going to retire, as best I could tell. But what do you say now? I mean, when are we going to do this? Do you have an answer, or is it still, you know, nobody knows?
I don't know, and I've always said I don't know. I've even been bold enough to confess that we may be working extremely hard, doing a very good job at looking for exactly the wrong thing. There may be some technology out there that we haven't invented that we don't know about yet. That is actually what's needed to do this job and to succeed. So I don't know the answer to that question. I just usually quote the last sentence of the 1959 paper by Philip Morrison and Giuseppe Cacconi, which is, the probability of success is difficult to estimate, but if we never search, the chance of success is 0. So I'm into the searching.
Sarah, final question for you. It seemed to me that there was a sort of a structural problem you had to confront in writing this book, namely that if you were writing about, I don't know, the Higgs boson, just to name something, you know, there's the prediction, and then there's the experiment, and the whole story about building the equipment and doing the experiment, and so forth and so on, and then in the end, they find the Higgs boson. But here, the quest is still ongoing. So how did you decide to deal with that?
Or is it, Seth? Are they here?
Well, they're in Milpitas, yes.
No, I mean, it would have been a lot easier of a book to write if you guys had found extraterrestrial intelligence. But I kind of...
And you were hoping we would the whole time you were writing it.
I thought it would be really great. Thanks a lot. I kind of, I wasn't sure when I set out to do it how I was going to confront that problem of building toward this climax that is never going to happen. And I kind of, as time went along, took my cue from how Jill has thought about her own career. She retired a few years ago, as I'm sure you all know. And like Seth mentioned, everyone started out a little more optimistic maybe about how contact might happen and when it might happen, and everyone has had to kind of come to their own realizations of making meaning of their careers even if they don't find that. And Jill has, correct me if I'm wrong about this, it's weird to talk about you in third person when you're sitting right here, come to the idea that SETI is a good way to have a very cosmic perspective of how big the universe is, how small we are, how much more alike everyone here and on Earth is than whatever we might find out there, and that it's a good way to frame thinking about that and get people having a bigger perspective, which is not as good a plot device as finding aliens, but I like to think it worked pretty well.
Yeah, I like what you did to end the book, which is to talk to the next generation. And you gave me a sense of legacy, of having passed along some encouragement and enthusiasm. The other thing is that somewhere along the line of my career, I started to think about, okay, maybe I won't find the signal. I can do the best job that I can. I really can't control that. But if I can leave this field financially stronger than we started, if we can find a way by the time that I'm finished cheerleading to have a stable financial funding for this kind of exploration, which may indeed be multi-generational, then I will have done something pretty damn good. And I can feel very good about that.
Great. And while it was mentioned that Jill is retired, that's, she's being exceptionally modest there because, in fact, Jill is still very much involved. So there's still a chance here, maybe the second edition, Sarah. I just want to end by this little discussion by saying, this is exploration, of course you know that. And pioneers in exploration are the people we remember, right? Circumnavigating the globe, Ferdinand Magellan. He didn't quite make it back himself entirely, but he had the bad form to get involved in some local dispute in the Philippines. But, who remembers who was the second person whose expedition circumnavigated the globe? Anybody? Shout it out if you know. Frank Drake, that's right. Isn't that a kind of Vasco da Gama? Vasco da Gama is a good guess, but wrong. Okay, yeah, it was Frank, but that was 58 years later, I believe, something like that. So you remember the pioneers. So one of the great things that's likely to happen in the 21st century, along with understanding biology, inventing artificial intelligence, I assume that's going to be great for the machines. But one of the things that we will do, I think, is find life in space, right? And when that story actually does come back, there'll be a resurgence in the sales of making contact, I'm quite sure.
That's when the second edition comes out?
Yes.
For sure.
All right, we're going to leave it here. A bit of an applause for our two guests up here. We're going to talk about new directions for SETI, and to discuss that, we have Bill Diamond's going to come back up. We're going to have Jill, and let's see, who else do we have? We have me, but Jerry Harp. Jerry, come on up. Jerry's the director of the SETI effort at the Institute these days. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, this is fairly short but free-forming, and what we would like to do is talk about some of the things that are happening in SETI at the Institute today. Some of the things that you can support. We're going to talk a little bit later about optical SETI, so not so much about that, but some of the ways that we can improve SETI. Now, you might say, improve SETI, what does that mean? If you haven't found anything, and 2 weeks later you still haven't found anything, is that an improvement? And so the metric, I think, for improving SETI is speeding up the search, right? Jill likes to say that, you go to the ocean, you take out a glass full of water, you don't find any, I don't know, bowhead whales or something, and you conclude, there are no whales in this ocean, right? Okay, fair enough. But she's emphasizing the fact that the sample size has been very small for SETI research. Despite the fact that it's a fairly old endeavor now, we still haven't, found anything. I think largely, I think most people would say, largely because we haven't, it's hard to believe they're not out there, but we haven't done what we can to speed up the search. So let's talk about some of these things. Jerry, I mean, this is going to be free-forming, so everybody can talk as they wish. But tell us a little bit about how we might do that by not building more antennas, but by improving the ones we've got.
Yeah, I was just working out today that as you know, we're using only a very small fraction of the data that comes out of the telescope, like 1/100th of 1%. And so if we can get that up to 1% with a factor of 100 improvement, that would be huge. We're still not using all of the data that actually are coming from the telescope because we just don't have the computer processing to process all that data. So what we're limited by right now is just how fast we can process the data.
So tell us, I'm sorry, Jill.
So we built, Jerry's talking about the Allen Telescope Array in Northern California at the Hat Creek Observatory. And so we built this telescope to be a Moore's Law machine. Right? We expected at the beginning that we would be terribly overwhelmed by this massive data that we can collect due to some very innovative feeds and receivers designed by Jack Welch, my husband, in Berkeley. And midlife for the array, we'd probably be well matched. We could swallow all the data that it presents. End of life, we'd be data starved. That's how we envisioned this, and that's what we're trying to do, is continue. We've got fabulous antennas and receivers, and continue to improve the back-end processing so that we can, in fact, access and analyze all the data that are coming in.
And just by way of example, first I should also point out that Jack Welch is not only her husband, and not only a pioneer actually in the development of radio telescopes, but also principally involved in the design of the Allen Telescope Array and the second generation of feeds for that array that have been supported by another honored guest here tonight, Franklin Antonio, and Jack is here tonight. So a shout out to Jack. But we put out about 54 terabytes of data per day. And as Jerry said, we're only just scratching the surface in what we do with our real-time data analysis using fast Fourier transforms of that data. There's an advantage to doing real-time data processing in that if we get a so-called wow signal, we don't have to wait till morning to find out, as happened back at Ohio State. But with new tools, and I think I can maybe get Jerry to talk a little bit about those new tools and a partnership we have with IBM, we have a new set of eyes and basically a new series of analytical capabilities that maybe will tell us we've actually already found something of interest. Elaborate on that a little, Jerry?
Well, yeah, so one way that we can look at the data differently is to take a large quantity of data, store it on a disk, and then put it up into the cloud, and then do kinds of processing on the data that are impossible to do in real time. And we can also, we're testing ideas for looking for planetary alignments. Whenever two planets line up with respect to our view from Earth, we imagine that if there's communication going between those two planets, like maybe there's a civilization that's inhabiting both, then...
Think of the TRAPPIST system, folks, right?
Well, yeah. There are such systems. And so when that alignment happens, we might be in a perfect position to capture their communication signals because it just blows by the other planet and some of it reaches our telescope. So we're trying a lot of other things. Oh, machine learning, I have to say, it was years before I could even imagine how machine learning might actually be able to apply to this problem. But we had a hackathon event, and we are currently doing a code challenge, principally with IBM, but also and other industrial partners, to develop, to see, to try some ideas with machine learning. So we brought in some of the best people, people whose job it is to do machine learning in Silicon Valley, and all volunteers. And in a couple of days, they were able to put together programs that were astonishingly good at categorizing signals. This is something that, I've been working on my whole career, so, but machine learning is really changing the game in a lot of ways.
One thing that maybe not everybody in the audience understands is that the back end, as it's called, which is the analysis part of the Allen telescope array, makes certain assumptions about what kind of signal to look for. And it is designed to do that. It's specialized hardware and software. So, we have Moore's Law here in the Valley. Tell us how we could change that so we do better than 1 part in 10 to the 4th of the data.
Well, we have said that what we're looking for is signals that are obviously engineered. And in the radio, we've taken that to mean signals that are extremely compressed in frequency. They occupy only 1 or 2 channels on the radio dial, because natural astrophysical emissions are broadband. They cover many frequencies. Our communications technologies are broadband, cover many frequencies. But these artifacts would be telling us that this is not something that Mother Nature created. This is something that was engineered. Well, somewhere between those extremely simple artifacts and extremely complex, efficient, almost noise-like broadband signals, there's quite a range. And what we're hoping to do is that we can use machine learning to move us along and allow us to detect not only the artifacts, but signals that have information content and are spread out in frequency, but in fact have structure that isn't anything that's natural. And that's what we're trying to learn to do with the machine learning, deep learning kinds of programs. And if we can figure out how to do that, then we look and say, how can we make it more efficient so that instead of having to save a lot of data and process it offline, we can actually move this up the pipeline and make it part of our real-time signal processing, these classification schemes.
Maybe you could also explain why it is that real-time has such an advantage. Not everybody does real-time science. The WOW signal was found, as you say, by a recorded data collection system.
Yeah, I've spent my whole career trying to say no more WOW signals, because when you see something once and you have no way of following up on it immediately, you can't. You really are stymied on how to say whether that was of interest or just noise or interference. And so what we do is we observe multiple targets, mostly stars that are nearby. At this point, it's stars that are very nearby. And we look at multiple targets at once. We require that any signals that are found, we can immediately, that is within 90 seconds, begin to follow up on them again. We do tests to make sure that the signal is seen in only one of the 3 directions we're looking and isn't coming in, scattering into the telescope and seen in more than one beam. We do all of these tests in an automated fashion, but we do it to be sensitive to signals whose persistence is limited.
And there's, if I recall correctly, there's like 6 layers of filtering and analytics that ultimately culminate in a decision that says this is interesting and worthy of yet further exploration or not.
Right, and for those events that happen only once, but could actually be a distant laser accelerating a spacecraft and just having to pass over our telescope. For signals that are transient, we've known since we wrote SETI 2020 back at the turn of the century that what we should do is try and build a system that looks at all the sky all the time. So
you don't want to be not home when the phone rings, I think is what we're trying to say.
Right, exactly. And we're still trying to figure out how to do that in the radio. We're again, compute limited right now. And you'll hear it a little bit later about how we might be doing it in the optical.
For those of you who don't know, the WOW signal, there's a story about it on our website if you're curious, but it's quite a famous event that happened at Ohio State in 1977. And for those of you old enough, like Seth and me and others who came from the Civil War, you remember data printouts on that green and white printout sheets. That's how we
Right.
interfaced and interacted with computers in those days. That was the graphic user interface, as it were. And one morning, researchers at Ohio State who were doing this radio astronomy SETI work came and looked at the printout, and there were some numbers there that stood out as being anomalous compared to anything else. And the scientists wrote in the margins, "Wow," with a couple of exclamation points. And that has since been known as the WOW signal, and of course it was never found again, in spite of many efforts. But that's why, as Jill is saying, all sky all the time, but also real time is so important in this endeavor.
Incidentally, about the WOW, the 40th anniversary of that event is coming up in August. And so in honor of that, we've been doing some new kinds of observations on that part of the sky, where we're looking at rather a large patch of sky around the direction where the telescope was pointed when the WOW signal was observed. And we're doing new kinds of analysis and new ways of looking at other possibilities that, other explanations of the WOW signal that maybe haven't been tested yet, other hypotheses about what it could have been. And I won't give you the answer yet, so you'll have to wait.
Yes, but the Allen Telescope
it's not
Array
a comment.
Allen Telescope Array is doing WOW redux, right?
Right.
So,
That's right.
yeah, well, maybe there'll be another WOW 2. Sometimes the second film is better. Jerry, I want to get back to this matter of improving the performance of the existing equipment. I mean, obviously, if you're going to improve the speed of SETI, you could build more antennas, right? That's one way to go. That would improve sensitivity. That would have a lot of benefits. But aluminum doesn't get cheaper with time, whereas things like, computing power does. So here's a way to improve things by 2 orders of magnitude, maybe a factor of 100. Right? Now, is that like, can you make an analogy with, say, if you gave Captain Cook, look, we're going to take that old Collier's, that thing runs on sails. We're going to give you a steam-powered ship, and it's 100 times faster. I don't think it was 100 times faster, but, would you have found more islands per unit time? I mean, is this going to make the difference? A factor of 100 is a big factor.
Yeah, well, although we don't know when we're going to find the signal, there's some period of time that we're going to have to search until we find it. And so we want to get through that period of time as quickly as possible. So if we can search quickly, then we can look at enough stars and eventually find that signal after having done the requisite amount of work. With our telescope as it is, we know that we can improve it by a factor of 100, and that means bringing that time when we find the signal 100 times closer to us in time.
This is also a little bit about, like Jill's marvelous analogy with the measuring cup. It's one thing if you stick the measuring cup in the ocean and find no whales, but it's another if you can stick 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 10 million measuring cups at the same time. Well, probability goes up quite a bit faster and more compelling way to look.
Well, Bill, in some ways, I mean, we're talking about new hardware and new software to run on that new hardware, right? I mean, we have things like the kind of specialized computers that run video games. It's over the highest technologies always with video games at CCS. Right. And this is a project that we should do. A factor of 100 is not to be sneezed at. Do we have the talent and the money to do this?
Not yet. we undertaking the advancements of these instruments is not only a technological challenge and a human resource challenge, it's also a financial challenge. So since NASA at this time does not fund SETI endeavors per se, they fund a lot of the research we do at the SETI Institute, but our radio and optical SETI projects are funded by philanthropic interests and the general public. And so if you're going to do things like invest in advancing the technology on the back end of these telescopes, or if you want to do more dishes, to your point, aluminum's the same price about as it was when we built the instrument. These things take capital investment. I'd say, we're short on both the capital investment and the human resources in order to really give this a 100 or 1,000-fold increase. And that has nothing to do with the quality of our resources. They're extraordinary, but just the quantity, just, what kind of what number of people and what kind of talent. We're talking also about new kinds of talent, new kinds of technology. It's digital signal processing, it's machine learning, it's software and programming, it's digital electronics, analog to digital signal processing, and so forth. So there's a lot that goes into this endeavor, and of course, it, you know, like so many endeavors, money makes it happen.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank our panel for giving us a look into the crystal ball, what's coming down the pike for SETI, and what could come down the pike. Thank you very much. Okay, this is Elliot Gillum, and I'd like to say you're a director at the SETI Institute, but you're not an employee. So maybe you should explain it. Take a seat, Elliot, because this is mostly, I just want you to tell what it is that we're doing here. We have a fundraising campaign on Indiegogo. It's called Laser SETI, and you know, it's an optical SETI experiment. That means we're not looking for radio signals with this experiment. We're looking for flashing lights in the sky. But more than just flashing lights in the sky, laser lights in the sky. And that's a critical difference. Why look for laser flashes?
Well, there's lots of reasons to look for lasers, I guess.
Can anybody hear him?
There we go. Microphone's on now. There's lots of reasons to look for lasers. One, we don't know many of the parameters of the SETI search, and that includes what frequency of light they might use. And there's lots of reasons why they might use lasers. We use lasers for tons of things in our technology today. They might use it to signal us. They might use it to accelerate spacecraft, because beam propulsion happens to circumvent some of the great difficulties in accelerating spacecraft to high velocities, thanks to Einstein.
And we might be looking at very short laser flashes. In the radio regime, if you're on the air for a microsecond or something, I mean, that's going to be hard to find. But with a laser flash, that might be possible to find.
Yeah, so they could be pointing a laser at us full time, or they could be just pinging once a day, once a year, once a century. They could be doing, as Jill referenced earlier, powering a spacecraft where you want the beam to fully cover the sail, otherwise you've wasted the mass of the sail. So the beam is necessarily going to spill out around the sail. And so as the spacecraft passes between us and the source of the laser, we would see the beam hit us twice, the part that spills over on the far near side and then the far side. And so we would see two brief flashes as the spacecraft passed between us. And that would be, depending on exactly where they are and what they're doing, it might last a millisecond, it might last a second. But it's a fascinating possibility that I think is worth considering, and particularly because it doesn't require them to be trying to contact us. They could just be doing their own thing, trying to get from A to B about their interplanetary business.
Well, let's say something about that question of alien sociology. You get a lot of questions about alien sociology. And as Chris Chiba at the SETI Institute years ago said, well, the data set on alien sociology is very sparse. Okay, well, true enough. But on the other hand, the radio experiments do make the assumption that they're kind of relentlessly targeting the Earth. When I say relentlessly, at least for minutes, right? They're targeting us with a signal. And you might think, yeah, of course they're going to do that. But why would they do that, right? If they're more than 70 light years away, none of our signals have reached them, right? Before the war, we didn't have the high-frequency, high-powered signals that could reach them. So if they're more than 70 light years away, and let's face it, most of the universe is, then they might not have any reason to target us other than the fact that there's oxygen in the atmosphere. So they know there's life here, but they don't know if there's anything intelligent. So as a high school science fair project, somebody has a big laser, and they ping the Earth every 2 weeks. Something we could not find with the current optical SETI experiments?
No, currently the best optical SETI experiments look at targets for roughly a minute. And so it's reasonable that you could repoint a mirror and hit lots of targets within a minute. So it's a valid exclusion of the parameter space to say we are not being pinged this often. But they make a trade-off because they have a very small field of view. It's a little bigger than the size of the sun or the moon. And so they want to look around and not place too much on one part of the sky, but that means they can't look for very long.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to miss.
So it could be short. Years ago, I remember Jack Welch, who's here in the audience, as mentioned, once said, well, if I were among the aliens and I wanted to contact the Earthlings, I would probably want to make a signal so strong even a cow could detect it. And for a while, there was a project called Cow SETI. Not Tau SETI, that's a difference. But Cow SETI, and in a way, I mean, you know, something that's so bright in the sky. But obviously, there's nothing that is that bright. The cows have not reported anything. They don't publish. But there could be something going off, you know, for a microsecond in almost any part of the sky, you know, a microsecond every two weeks. Just a little flash, the same brightness as a 6th magnitude star, 5th magnitude star, and we wouldn't know. So tell me what this new instrument, Laser SETI is trying to fund, could do.
Well, so it's designed to be the most practical way to cover all the sky all the time. So we place cameras in observatories around the world. It only takes 6 observatories, 3 in each hemisphere, to see the sky once. We want to have 12, because that way, if we see a signal, we have a lot more confidence. If it's something transient, like Jill said in the radio, it's a lot harder to know that a signal that you received just for a brief flash really came from there and wasn't just an airplane that happened to be at the right point and light up his transponder or something like that. And so if we're going to look for a transient signal and be able to say this is it and hang our reputation on it, then we want to be able to know with extremely high confidence.
Tell me how, where does this project stand? I mean, we have this Indiegogo campaign. You're trying to raise $100,000 to fund this, but it isn't just pie in the sky good idea. You've been working on this for a while.
Yeah, it's actually not even our first good idea. Just on this project, I should be clear. We started out with one way of doing it, and we think we've improved the idea so that we get even cheaper, even more robust to be able to sit out in the field. Because if you're going to have all these instruments out in the field for years staring at the sky, you want them to work reliably. And so we tried to minimize the cost for doing this and make sure that the science was going to be reliable if we get the flash.
And so let's not just say, let's presume that we'll be able to get the money to build this equipment. You're the guy in charge. When are these things going to be scanning the sky, looking for those short, bright flashes?
Well, I guess that has to do with exactly when the money comes in. If someone were to write a check right now, I would say, great, let me go build the 1st and 2nd observatories, really prove out the thing. I don't want to go spend $2 million on hardware until I know it's absolutely going to work. So I would do it in 2 phases if I had, you know, that bank account that you swim in with all the money. If the money comes in slower than that, then there's intermediary phases that we'll go through to prove out the instrument, do as much science as we can, and try to keep building on that learning.
Okay, Scrooge McDuck, I think that was. Yes. Everybody's forgotten Scrooge McDuck in the era of Bitcoin credit cards.
You can't swim in your digital currency.
Yes. Okay, so within a couple of years, we could be doing.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you've tried out a prototype. I mean, you know that the scheme works, right? Because the problem with optical SETI so far is people have used photomultiplier tubes. There are plenty of people in the audience who know what that is. It's very fast. You can see very sharp pulses, very short pulses. But, you know, you get 1 pixel on the sky. And the idea here is not to get 1 pixel on the sky.
Yeah, so we tried out lots of ideas on paper. We built 2 of them. So we have a prototype of our current generation device that has a very wide field of view. It's a very robust instrument. It's easy to build and maintain. And we could build that out relatively quickly, kind of as quickly as we ordered the parts and could get on airplanes. But so it can see a huge fraction of the sky with the specialized readout that we do. Gives us very high time resolution.
Great. Well, you've all heard him. Laser SETI, just go to Indiegogo, right? Laser SETI.
LaserSETI.org.
Or SETI.org.
It's even easier.
Oh, we have the video clip. I forget. Yes.
Yeah.
On my. Okay, we can run the video. It's 40 minutes. Can we do that? I mean, is it possible?
Yeah, there we go.
Are they out there? The alien creatures in the movies are fictional, but can we find the real ones? We have never found life beyond Earth. Never. But there's a new way to search, one that the SETI Institute and you could make possible.
Did the aliens know we're here? There hasn't been enough time for our FM radio, our radar, our television to reach them, but they will know that there's oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. They will know that this planet is encrusted with biology.
That might be incentive enough for them to ping Earth with a signal to see if anyone's at home. And that signal could be the flash of a laser, which can be seen from light years away.
Powerful lasers for signaling could be built by any advanced society. They could use them to propel their spacecraft. And the thing is that brief flashes of light, shorter than the blink of an eye, could be in our skies right now, and we wouldn't know it.
The SETI experiments that look for brief light signals examine only one star system at a time. That's like looking for a needle in a haystack using tweezers. But that's yesterday's technology, and there's a better way, a much better way.
I spent the last 2 years designing the ideal device for a practical all-sky survey. With novel optics and specialized processing, we can leverage off-the-shelf hardware to minimize cost while still being able to detect pulses shorter than a millisecond. With an array of these spread throughout the globe, we can monitor the entire night sky continuously for the first time ever.
In a universe as vast as we know ours to be, it's difficult to believe they're not out there. That's why we're intent on raising $100,000 to build and test the prototype for this revolutionary new telescope.
All right, the next thing on the agenda, thank you, Elliot, but don't go anywhere because we're going to have some Q&A. So all the panelists should come on up here because you may get one of those questions that, you know, you'd never heard before. So we're, oh, okay. All right, we do have a mic up here. If you have a question, you have to sort of line up.
There's two microphones. So, the bad news with events like this is they never come for free. There's two things that happen nowadays with increasing frequency no matter what you're doing, and that includes going to Walgreens to get contact lens solution. That is, you're either going to get a promotion or you're going to get a survey to ask you how the experience was. So we're going to spare you the survey, but we do want to promote this amazing new project, this optical SETI project called Laser SETI. So as was mentioned, it's an Indiegogo campaign that is now live. It went live today. It's already, I think, closing in on the first $20,000. And we're very, very excited. Yep. Very excited about this project. And it really is a game changer in the world of SETI. Not only does it for the first time really bring, in a comprehensive way, a new modality, if you will, or a new search arena in terms of different portion of the electromagnetic spectrum being surveyed, but it is something that does this across the entire sky all the time, all over the planet, and that's never been done before with any technology, not with radio, not with optical. So this is really groundbreaking and profound work. I'd like to think that in the 33 years of the Institute's history, it's not the first good idea, but but it's right up there. It's a great idea. So if you just remember laserseti.org, that'll take you to the Indiegogo page and take a look. The video's there. There's for the Star Trek fans, there's a couple of nice supportive remarks from LeVar Burton, and it's a really wonderful project. Making that project happen means we deploy the first observatory. We test out the instrumentation, the electronics, the signal processing, and we make this a reality. And then we deploy this globally for what really could be a game changer in the SETI world. So remember laserseti.org. Please take a look at it, and let your friends know. Use your amazing social media contacts, and let the world know about this. So thanks, Elliot, for that. It's an exciting project. And I think now we've got some questions, and we've got some panelists ready to answer. So why don't we start with you?
Good evening. I have a question for Jill, sort of a career question, but also a science question. So from memory, the Drake equation has like 6 or 7 variables. And when you started your career, they were, well, we thought we knew the first one about like the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and we were wrong, I think. And nothing about the others, nothing at all. And now we've got, like, I think the first three, we've got a pretty good handle, the number of stars and percentage that have planets, the percentage that are Earth-sized things in a habitable zone. But that's 3 out of 7. And even though the other 4 are like complete unknowns, it feels like we should have a better handle on the probability or the number of alien civilizations, but I think it's still like no closer than when you started. Or does it feel like you have a better handle on the asymptotes?
Well, the Drake equation is a wonderful way to organize our ignorance. But you can't calculate anything with it because there are so many unknown terms. What I can say is that over my career, the universe has begun to appear more bio-friendly, right? Exoplanets, planets outnumber stars. Extremophiles, we know that life can live in conditions which we would have said when I was a student are absolutely uninhabitable. So those 2 factors mean that there's potentially a lot of habitable real estate out there. But today, just as back when we started, we don't yet know if any of it is inhabited, either by microbes or mathematicians. So could have gone the other way. I think it could have been that planets are very rare. Could have been that indeed what we thought about life when I was a student, that really narrow range of being able to make a living, was right, but it was dead wrong. And so there's a lot of possibilities.
And if you know it is populated with a lot of mathematicians, they're also probably doing the math. And since the Kepler mission has now told us that, the number of planets in the habitable zone of their sun-like star is something in the billions, the odds are pretty good.
Yeah, maybe we'll meet those mathematician microbes.
There you go. Maybe on this side?
Yeah, it's for Elliot. Laser beams, no matter what, still diverge, not as rapidly as other sources of light. And so the farther away a star is where they're launching a laser beam, the weaker it's going to be by the time we get here. So have you sort of worked out a parameter space of how far away it has to be, and if it's that far away, how powerful does the beam have to be?
Yeah, I've run through a number of scenarios. You're right, all light sources fall off with R squared. With optical, you can focus beams many times narrower than with radio. From 1,000 light years away, we could illuminate an area about the size of the orbit of Mars. And so that's a significant advantage. When you look at how far away could you detect a signal, the problem is you have an unknown. We don't know how big their laser is. The focusing is actually much easier. The question is really how many photons do they put into the laser. And we can do the math for what we could do, and that works out to be thousands of stars around us. But if you imagine that we harness, what is it, 1% of the sun's energy is kind of the energy budget of the Earth. If you imagine a more advanced society having 10%, 100%, more, you can imagine much more powerful lasers. And in fact, that's what we're already planning on doing with we humanity, I should be the royal we, focusing, 10 million 10 kilowatt lasers to accelerate a spacecraft at 20% of the speed of light. And lasers that bright can be seen extremely far away. And in fact, some people are already talking about illuminating to the event horizon. If you imagine that technology extended a little bit beyond what we can do, that you could illuminate everything along a line of sight. So that's what we don't know.
I mean, the technology we have now today on Earth, which we haven't deployed in this manner, but it theoretically could be, between combination of telescopes with big mirrors and powerful lasers, which we have built, we know that we could outshine the sun by a factor of about 10,000 times. So we can make a pretty bright beacon of our own, just where we are, and we're, let's say, 100 years into technology as a civilization.
Thank you.
Yes.
I can't think of any correlation, but maybe you guys can. Is there any reason to think that if you have a place for an optical signal, you might look for a radio signal or vice versa? So if you found a signal in one of your systems, you'd look for it in the other system?
Actually, that's a good idea. And there's a group in Japan that has started doing that. They're running observing campaigns with both optical and radio telescopes looking at the same sources at the same time.
Here, you might mention Trappist, because that was done.
Yeah.
We did do that.
That's right, yeah. So we have
An example.
simultaneously observed with optical instruments and with our radio telescope.
So that's the, the TRAPPIST system. If you saw the New York Times headline a few months back, where this planetary system in a star about 40 light years from here was discovered with 7 planets around it, at least 3 of which are in the habitable zone or believed to be in the habitable zone of that star. And so that was an optical observation, and we've been using the Allen Telescope Array to probe that system, including some of the things Jerry was talking about before, looking at those alignments of planets and seeing if we could snoop in on some conversations.
One quick comment. Jill and I were in engineering physics together at Cornell. She's far and away the most famous person from our class, and we're very proud of her.
Jill, I'm John Faulkner, and I'm happy to tell you that a few short years ago, Bob Kraft and I and my partner had breakfast with Margaret Burbidge and her daughter Sarah in the Hotel Whitcomb, which we went to right up until Bob's unfortunate death 2 years ago for massive opera extravaganzas. And as recently as within the last month, my friend and former graduate student contemporary under Fred Hoyle, Jayant Nalika, and his wife Mangala had a meal prepared by Sarah Burbidge in her home with Margaret present. And Margaret does remember a few significant events. She's in her upper 90s right now. And one of the things she remembers is that when she was appointed the director of the Royal Greenwich Observatory, for the first time, the title of Astronomer Royal of Great Britain was detached from that position and given to a man, Graham Smith of Manchester. And if I may add something else, I knew or knew of both Seth and you when each of you were separately graduate students. Seth, I knew between 64 and 66 at Caltech, and you, I cannot remember the first time I met you, but anyway, you were at that time both what my disabled adult daughter Sarah would say was when you was little graduate students. But I also think I know something gnomic about you that perhaps few people in the audience here or your professional colleagues might know. And that is that Jill has the almost unique experience of writing her first paper that was also her last paper. Now, let me explain how her first paper became her last paper, because she did actually publish many more papers. Unfortunately, in the year that I came to Santa Cruz to start the group in theoretical astrophysics there in 1969, Jill's supervisor, a very famous expert in stellar structure and evolution, unfortunately died of a heart attack. But there were 4 students left who decided they would write a final paper to come out of the group. And their names were Tarter, Schweitzer, Allen, and Liebert. But if you order them in the right direction, it becomes the acronym LAST. So her first paper was the last paper.
There we are.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
So I had a question. How do you know that the signals which you're getting is not like space debris which is still alive and it still has some activity going on?
That's something that we struggle with, knowing that the detected signal is actually coming from someone else's technology, not our own, or that it's not coming from a natural source of emission. So part of the answer is the type of signals that we look for. We're pretty sure that they can't be generated by nature. And then as to discriminating between their technology and our own technology, we go to a lot of different lengths to do that. We've simultaneously observed with widely separated telescopes that allows us to use the Earth's rotation to determine whether something's coming from a long distance on the sky. We now use an interferometer, which helps us, again, localize the source and discriminate against something that's near, and our own satellites, for example. But that is indeed probably our biggest challenge. With whatever compute power we have, we're having to allocate a significant fraction of it to doing this discrimination job, to make sure that it isn't our own technology that we discover.
So we're not yet certain from where it's coming from?
Well, we have had what we call false positives. That is, we have detected signals that we thought were exactly what we were looking for. Unfortunately, as we continued to observe them for longer times, we finally figured out that it was human-made, man-made technologies. And so, no, we haven't yet detected a signal from an extraterrestrial technology.
Actually,
That's a great question.
Can I add on to that?
What's that? You want to add something to that?
So that's one of the things we have to worry about in the optical as well. But looking all the time, I think it's actually more likely that we'll find something new and natural. No one's ever pointed an instrument at the sky like this, covered this much sky. And so one of the things I like about SETI is it forces you to learn all about nature so that you can find something that is extra natural. And so I think that's something you always have to be prepared for, and it's statistically, it's the more likely outcome. We found 0 signals and lots of new nature.
So where's the young scientist who asked that question? Okay, so that was a great question. The address of the Institute is 189 Bernardo Avenue in Mountain View, so I'm expecting your resume. And I can assure you that I was not asking such perceptive questions at your age, so we look forward to working with you. Okay, great question.
Evening, Michael Moon. Question for all of you. It occurs to me that most of what we know about our history as a species comes not from signals, whether they be written on clay tablets or papyrus or anything else, but from detritus. And so I'm wondering what avenues are being explored to find, say, the remnants of a K2 civilization through infrared detection, or even something larger now that LIGO's online, evidences of a civilization that are, not to get too Arthur C. Clarke on you, right, but indistinguishable from magic.
You want to take that one, Seth?
Not a whole heck of a lot, but there's an economist actually in Virginia, Hansen is his name, right? I think he's at George Mason. I may have the affiliation incorrect, but he has suggested your idea in a series of papers and talks, and he's saying, look, the universe is 3 times as old as the Earth, so there could be a sort of civilizations out there that go from one star system to another, and they leave their garbage because it's too expensive to cart it away. Right? And the kind of garbage that he was suggesting we might be able to find would be radioactive waste. That's one thing, okay? As more specifically, the idea of waste, the infrared observations, there have been some people who have sort of analyzed the results from infrared telescopes, of which there are many, of course, in space, and try to see, look, does this star have an excess of infrared? Maybe it's a type 2 civilization, as you say, and so this is the waste heat from a Dyson swarm or something like that. That's been suggested for the case of TRAPPIST-1. Maybe that, not TRAPPIST-1, Tabby star, yes. KIC 846-2851, if you know it better that way. But, so that's been done too, but the problem there is that, of course, a lot of stars have a lot of infrared radiation because they have dust around them and so forth. But the idea is a very good one.
There's a great talk in the Institute Colloquium series by Jason Wright on this topic, WRIGHT. I encourage you.
One of the SETI Talks.
Yes, yeah. One of the 400 out there on YouTube.
And I'll just quickly correct Seth. It's actually 846-2852.
52.
Thank you for playing.
46, 28, 50. Hi, I was. You asked the question. You mentioned earlier that if somebody does signal us, you really don't. You want to make sure that you're home when somebody calls. Do you have any type of digital, auditory, or visual answering machine to capture the data? Because what if you're, for instance, you're having a signal and you're going whoop, 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 already, spanning somewhere else in the universe, and they've been trying to. How do you manage that? I mean, you may have answered it earlier, but.
Jerry, do you want to?
Sure. Well, astronomers are always taking pictures of the sky in various ways, and those images go back hundreds of years that we can go back and look at them and look for, like when they discovered Tabby's star, they went back to learn if it had been dimming for a long time, and indeed it seemed to have been dimming for the last 100 years. So we have that kind of data. However, the difficulty is that there's so much information that you can get from the sky as a function of time. A huge range of frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, and all possible timescales from nanoseconds to years. And in order to probe all of that space, we can't afford to store all the data. That's really what it's about.
It gets back to the whole issue, though, as well, of the compelling science or idea behind this all-sky, all-the-time optical survey. At least this is, for the first time, some way of surveying all of the sky for signals of some kind all of the time. That hasn't been done in the radio frequency, and it's very difficult to do if you have to point antennas at even regions of the sky, let alone individual points of light in the sky. There's a lot of sky to cover. There's a lot of time to cover. So it's the point you raise is a huge challenge. But again, that's one of the exciting things about the Laser SETI project. But also the Allen Telescope Array is the only instrument in the world that's doing radio SETI work 365 days a year. There's no other instrument on the planet that's doing that.
And Jerry said we can't afford to store all the data, but we do store data on every signal that is detected. And with the machine learning, what we've been trying to do is take years of data and see if there's any correlation with signals found at one frequency and signals found at another frequency. We're calculating the density of signals found as a function of position on the sky. And so we're looking for we've kept data about things we found, and now we're looking for additional patterns in those data.
All right. So if our panelists and audience will endure, we'll just take these last questions for people who've already come up, but then we're holding you over, so we appreciate you.
Great. Thank you for coming here tonight. And I have two questions. First question for Writer and Jill. It's about, during this process, what have you learned from each other, like you really appreciate as a women? Like sometimes we see little girls and they feel like, oh, I'm not worse than a boy, or like I can do whatever a boy can do. What have you seen from each other, like you appreciate that aspect of being a woman?
Let me start. I love Sarah's writing voice. It's extremely energetic, and she makes up words, And
That's
I have just been in awe of how fast she can write.
Thank you. And I would say I have learned, SETI hasn't had an easy road since it started. It's had, as you might have gathered, some funding troubles in the past, some political troubles. And there were a lot of times when Jill and her colleagues could have quit doing what they're doing, but instead they kept doing it. And as a person who was writing a book, which is less difficult than doing SETI, but still pretty hard, and you can also quit anytime. I don't know. It's keeping going, I guess, that Jill did a good job of that.
My second question is about the definition of intelligence. So, okay.
How much time do we have?
Not in that. That's like, have we changed the standard of definition, looking for intelligent signals, like what you say, radiation signals or anything, maybe even among the radio signal data? Have that definition or standard evolved from the first day SETI has been set? And if that has evolved, once you start using machine learning to mine the data, to analyze the data, how are you going to guide the machine learning process? If we guide them, the machine learning will be very biased by our human definition of intelligence. We might ignore something. Actually, we might have already found something.
Well, actually, intelligence in this sense is a bit of a misnomer. We call it the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, but we don't know how to find intelligence. What we do is use technology as our proxy for intelligence. So we're looking for evidence of someone else's technology. And certainly, there may be technologies that we don't yet understand and wouldn't recognize. But if we find something that says technology, we will infer that at some time, at any way, intelligent technologists created that technology. So we sort of, duck around this very important question about what is intelligence and what might we miss because we don't define it broadly enough. We're searching for technology.
I would add that we are guilty of looking for ourselves. So back when Drake's day, AM radio was big, and so obviously the extraterrestrials were transmitting AM radio signals, something similar to that. Of course, then FM was invented, and then we have satellites now that have very, very complex ways of communicating, and so we have always tried to devise methods to find things that we can create. However, there's a hope that with unguided machine learning, basically we just throw all of our data at the machine and let it tell us what's interesting, that maybe we can expand into signals that we haven't thought of.
And
go ahead, Elliot.
As someone who was actually thinking about the code that does the detecting for the optical SETI project on the drive here, I can say that there's kind of a balance of, on some level, you're looking for a things you don't understand detector. You're trying to throw away all the things you think you understand, and it's easier to throw away airplanes than it is to throw away nature that we don't know yet. And so you have to sort of, it depends on the instrument, I would say, but you have to strike this balance of how naive can I be and how much knowledge do I have to insert in order to make sure that I don't just build an airplane detector or a cloud detector or a moon detector.
Certainly there's a lot of difference between microbes, which is perhaps what we're most likely to first find in terms of life beyond Earth, and we might find it very close by, and technology or civilizations or beings capable of making their presence known through technology. There's an awful lot of biology on Earth that is communicative and intelligent, but not technological. So there are researchers at the SETI Institute who are also trying to probe those very same questions. For example, is it possible that certain types of complex biology and intelligent biology leave a detectable imprint, for example, in their atmosphere, that we could, if we could identify that fingerprint, say, and then detect from a great distance, and we now know where to look because there's lots of exoplanets and we can probe their atmospheres with instrumentation, might we be able to find biosignatures or evidence of life, complex life, and perhaps even intelligent life without yet being able to see evidence of technology. So we're trying to probe that intelligence spectrum, if you will, from the very simplest of organisms on up to complex biology and intelligence in its broadest definitions.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Dr. Tarter. I have not met you yet. My name is Adam Glickman. I come here with the unusual. What should we send to the moon this year that's a ½ kilogram in weight and could be split between two 200-gram modules? But hold on, that's still too big. How about if maybe SETI has, say, we're somewhere between 20 grams and 50 grams? What might be possible, and then what might be possible with a 100-gram chip of wildness? Leave that to imagination, especially around new material, new principles, new frequencies, perchance.
I'm wondering whether we could send some sort of mylar structure folded that could unfold with some kind of tensioning ring into a parabolic reflector to help us do moon bounce calibrations of our equipment.
My moon bounce guy that has been at an unusual moon bounce location, I won't answer name where, is gung-ho to retry that again.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. And thanks for the answer. This is real. I think we have a very strong chance of hitting the moon with a soft landing with a collaborative staging between pharma, biotech, SETI, of course, and there seems to be various labs quite interested in this. What can we do in this valley with an unusual fund? Create a stew. That's what I'm about here.
All right.
My name again, Adam Glickman.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you, Dr.
Young man.
Hi, I just want to give you a question about like a planet that was discovered last year around Proxima Centauri b, and it's 4.2 light years away, or 25 trillion miles away. And I just want to say, like, how he was talking about, like, it could only take like 20 years. It's still a little bit of a while.
Get your PhD by then.
I was talking about is like if we could like freeze humans inside, so then they won't like age at all, and then when they get there, they like won't feel difference at all.
Do you want to go?
Sure.
Smaller humans would be advantageous.
It's a great idea. How about this? We'll just increase your lifespan to 150, and then it won't seem so bad. Nobody knows how to put you to sleep for 25, 50 years and have you wake up. Yeah, well, Hollywood does. Hollywood has faster than light travel. But yeah, that's an interesting problem. But remember, these plans to send something to Proxima Centauri, right? They are going to send something about the size of a 50-cent piece, right? It's very small. So,
but they might send a whole lot of them.
Yeah, they'll send a lot of them. They'll send a lot of them. But, if you want to go along, then we have to dice you up into 50-cent pieces.
I would like that.
Or you can figure out how to build bigger lasers so we can launch bigger spacecraft.
And by the way, I figured out the mathematical microbes. They're called algebra. That's it.
I've been waiting all night for something that bad, but it didn't take too long. Great question, though, and another recruit, so I don't want you dicing up our recruits, if you don't mind. So.
Again.
So how am I supposed to follow that one? I was just wondering, since there's getting to be more and more broad surveys, like Dark Energy Survey, LSST is coming, and they have public, the data will be public. Is there any way that you folks can use that and make other people spend all the money on building stuff and getting and keeping the data?
Data mining is going to be a big part of our future. And yes, so you're absolutely correct. There are a lot of new instruments coming online. And the question is, at what cadence do they record the data? Are they going to be sensitive to very short timescales? But we should be mining all kinds of databases that are there.
Well, I know LSST is one of their big focuses is transients. So I don't know if it'll be.
But is it transients on the microsecond timescale or the hour timescale?
That's one of the ideas that we did on paper. LSST covers the sky once every 3 days, and it doesn't have any spectral capability. And so all you would know is that there was a flash, and how would you know that that flash just wasn't a high-altitude airplane or a satellite glint or things like that? That's why the spectroscopy is built into our instrument. There's other ideas we've looked at where like...
how about DISI?
Sorry?
The dark energy spectroscopic instrument.
I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
Okay, yeah.
I was thinking other satellite telescopes that they usually take a number of exposures and throw out the transients in order to build the clearer common picture. And so one of the things when I've spoken with engineers on projects like that is to say, well, could you give us the transients and maybe we could, you know, which one is it? I can't remember now. There's one that has a really wide field of view. Oh, it's TESS. That's one. TESS has a really wide field of view and uses FPGAs for processing the data. And so I thought, well, maybe after they do their first run of data, we could get some part of the silicon on the FPGA to look at the different frames that they integrate and start to do something that way. But it's tricky because most traditional instruments, even traditional radio telescopes, are really not set up to throw away the false positives. And so that's really what it comes down to in a lot of cases is we might have already gathered the pulse. You know, but maybe we didn't recognize it because maybe we just couldn't tell it from something else.
Last question.
Okay, I'll try to make it a good one. Right now, our society is mired in the technology of chemical rockets. Eventually, we're going to want to get beyond that, and we're going to be tired of taking a year to get to Mars or 10 years to get to Saturn or things like that. So we're going to move on to the next generation of rocketry, which would be fission-based rockets, fusion-based rockets, and eventually antimatter-based rockets, all three of which have one signal in common, namely gobs of gamma radiation coming out the nozzle. And it occurred to me that this might be a detectable signal for you folks, since it tends to be fairly concentrated. It also has the advantage of lasting for, depending on what kind of burn you're doing, several days, several weeks, a month, something like that. So that might be an indication of an intermediate class spacefaring society.
Indeed, when gamma ray burst sources were first detected.
Those are way too powerful. I'm way below that.
Well, all right, but I was going to tell you that several researchers did try to line them up in four-dimensional space-time to see if they were the accelerations on trajectories of spacecraft.
And I might also say that there has been, if you will, library research to explore this idea where people went through the Gamma Ray Explorer data to see if they could find something. But if you do the numbers, unfortunately, it turns out that it's very hard to find a rocket that's using these kinds of propulsions from very far away. And I say very far away, the limits were like 1 light year, not terribly great. So.
All right, well, that includes our Q&A, and it includes the formal part of our evening. Again, I want to thank you all so much for coming. I want to thank our panelists, of course, most especially. Most especially our author, Sarah Scoles, and Jill, and Seth's MC work, with the singular exception of the bad pun.
Signing books?
Yes. So a couple of things. There are still books for sale outside. Jill and Sarah will be here signing books for a little bit. We do need to get them to dinner. So, but if you have a book and you'd like them to sign it, they'll be doing that for a few minutes after the talk. And I would remind you all that because this is now part of our ongoing SETI Talks lecture series, this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the coming days, so you'll be able to find it here. Tomorrow afternoon, for those of you who follow us on Facebook, we've been doing now a regular series of Facebook Live events for the past several weeks, and we try to make those events fun and lively and give an opportunity to meet the different scientists, both our researchers at NASA Ames, researchers out in the field, and at the Institute. Tomorrow's Facebook Live event at 2 o'clock in the afternoon will be Jill and Sarah again talking about the book. So you've had a chance, but maybe your friends would like to tune into that. So that's a Facebook event tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And again, you can always find out what's going on at the SETI Institute by visiting us at SETI.org. We'd love to have you come and look and see what's going on. We always have interesting stories about our science and commentary and perspectives on the work of our colleagues elsewhere. So come often and visit us. Again, we'll be doing the SETI Talks starting up again in August, and we'll be announcing that venue in the coming days, with the next SETI Talk being our REU students and their Lightning Talk series. So we hope all of you will be able to come back and enjoy that and support those students who are over there giggling in fear right now as we speak. So thank you again all very much.